Hey, welcome back, everybody. Happy Friday. Hopefully, we are having a wonderful end to the week and hopefully getting ready for the weekend out there. And we are unfortunately still watching the tropics here. I do think there is the potential for some sort of development here, really going into as early as next week, potentially the middle of next week, getting towards the end of October and towards that Halloween timeframe. Now, currently, nothing is set in stone, so hopefully this doesn't happen. But unfortunately, one of our models in particular has really held strong on the idea of this, and the other models, I won't say have trended towards it, but they've definitely moved maybe a little bit more in that direction. So we'll definitely talk about that in today's video. We're also going to discuss this big time pattern change on the way for much of the lower 48 going into next week, with that potential for some storminess returning to the forecast. I will add here at the beginning, I'm fighting some sort of weird cough that for some reason will not leave me alone. So if there's breaks in the video or if I randomly just have to stop, go ahead and just assume that that's what it is. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive on into that forecast. Well, I guess before we do, obviously, if you haven't subscribed, do that. Like the video, comment, let me know where you're watching from, and all that normal good stuff. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, taking a look at current satellite imagery, we do have what is left of Oscar here, and that is going to work up into Atlantic Canada this afternoon and into the early part of this weekend. Excuse me, this is going to be a long video, okay? I'll just let you know right now. So we are going to see some rain up into Newfoundland this afternoon and probably even into portions of Nova Scotia. And I'm realizing I forgot to pull that map up, but we'll do that at some point in the video. I will show that, but that might be later on in the video. Other than that, though, right now, really not a lot going on out there. We do have finally some storminess returning to portions of the United States here. We had actually some pretty feisty storms yesterday through the Kansas City area. A lot of lightning with those. Some severe thunderstorm warnings were issued. So hopefully that didn't catch anybody off guard out that way. Other than that, I mean, we are still very quiet in the Gulf and the Caribbean. I know there's been a lot of talk down here, from myself included. But currently, again, not really seeing a lot of shower or thunderstorm activity in that region. We do have, another storm system working towards the Pacific Northwest, which is just off to the side of your screen. But we'll talk about that a little more in depth here in a moment. Now, latest from the National Hurricane Center, still not anything of significance expected over the next 7 days. They don't have any areas on their map indicating that we're going to see some sort of storm form here. But that does not mean it is not possible, especially kind of towards the latter end of that period, starting, I would say, really next Wednesday onward, is when we will have that, or will have that potential for some tropical development down here, especially into the Caribbean. But I will add, some of our models are also picking up on an area here towards the southeast Atlantic, kind of near the Bahamas and back down towards Puerto Rico on the Atlantic side of the island. So it's not just the Caribbean we're watching. There are a couple areas of kind of some final hoorahs of hurricane season, if you will, here. And again, we're going to break that down here in just a second. But what I'll show you, you might be saying, well, Gerald, it's almost November. Why are we talking about the tropics at this point? You're probably hyping this up, or, I've gotten plenty of those comments. Trust me, I've read them all. But I can guarantee I'm not the only person looking at this. The Climate Prediction Center is still holding strong here that there is the potential for some tropical development here into the Caribbean, and then also kind of that blob off towards the Southwest Atlantic. So again, watching a couple areas here for the very end of October and especially that first week in November. Now, for your Halloween forecast, I think the United States will be fine. You folks down towards Jamaica, into Cuba, Hispaniola, could be a little more treacherous down that way, but it's really the first week in November that I think this storm would have a higher potential of bringing some sort of impacts potentially into maybe Florida or the southeastern United States. Now, is that a forecast? No, it's just something I'm watching, okay? So I don't want you, again, to turn the video off and tell the world Gerald said a major hurricane is going to hit Florida the first week in November. That is not my forecast. What my forecast is right now is for likely some sort of tropical mischief to get going in the Caribbean and generally pull northward in nature. And then what happens after that, I think, is where the forecast gets really tricky. But I do think conditions are relatively favorable, excuse me, in the Caribbean for some sort of development out this way. So taking a look at ocean heat content, or I guess surface sea temperatures, technically not heat content in the ocean. But we do have very warm temperatures still in the Caribbean. In fact, some of the warmest ocean temperatures in the Atlantic currently in this region. So it would not be impossible, again, to spin a storm up off of this. In fact, you could get pretty healthy storm growth off of temperatures like this. Again, near 30 degrees Celsius, that's in the upper 80s for Fahrenheit. Again, you only need temperatures in the upper 70s and lower 80s for tropical development. This is well above that. So the bigger question will be, do we have wind shear that kind of prevents storm development, or do we, have dry air in the vicinity? Okay, so let's go ahead and start with some model guidance. I'll start with the GFS here, and then we will move to the other models. But the GFS has been the one that has been very steady, folks, in the idea that we get some sort of tropical development down into the Western Caribbean. So let's start with that one. This is going into next Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning, the 30th of October. So the very end of the month here, or at least the day before the very end of the month. And you'll notice down here into the Caribbean, we do have an area of low pressure deepening, but not only there, again, down here into the southeastern Bahamas, we have low pressure developing in a very similar area to where Hurricane Oscar was not very long ago. So, kind of interesting there. Nature does like to repeat itself sometimes, or at least rhyme with itself. Might be a better way to word it there. But we move this further ahead into time, and we get actually 2 storms to develop here on the GFS within a week. This is Halloween afternoon. We have a feisty tropical storm, borderline hurricane, well down into the Caribbean, and then a very small but tropical storm over the southeastern Bahamas on Halloween Day. And again, this is less than a week away from now, folks. I'm not showing you some Fantasyland 10, 15-day out model run at this point. This is, I won't say knocking on the doorstep, but it's definitely getting closer into range here. And then we move this further ahead into time, and kind of what happens, and this is generally, I won't say normal for November because it isn't, but this is kind of what you would expect for some sort of November system. You would expect some sort of just big gyre of spin with embedded areas of stronger rotation. And that's kind of what the GFS has here. We have one tropical storm on the north side near South Florida, and then a hurricane on the south side of this big spin down into the Caribbean, not far from Jamaica and Hispaniola, getting into about a week from right now. And what happens is they kind of spin around each other in this big general gyre, and eventually we get a hurricane that pulls up through Haiti there, and then into the Bahamas about a little more than a week from now. And then kind of gets near the southeast coastline and fizzles out there as it finally runs into some wind shear and dry air. Again, every run from the GFS has been a little bit different in the overall outcome, but it has been very similar in the idea that it wants to form a storm, if not in this case, 2 storms within the next 7 to 10 days. And I think it's onto something. I really do. The GFS has done relatively well this year. Kind of picking out these storms early on. And granted, overall, the GFS has had a bias through its lifetime of forming up ghost storms that never happen, which I guess is fitting for Halloween. But they did do some upgrades to the GFS over the past couple of years. And this year, I mean, it's been right up there with the European, I would argue, in the tropics. So that's one of the reasons I'm spending so much time talking about this. I think it really does have legs. In fact, the GFS was the only model that showed Nadine forming. It was, a little bit off on the timing, but it had the storm. Same thing for Milton. It was off on the timing, but it had the storm. I do think it is of note. It's worth mentioning, I guess, is the best way to word it. All right, so the European model, obviously a different model than the GFS, but I'll tell you, this is a week from right now. So you're noticing here, you're like, okay, well, there's nothing in the Caribbean, there's nothing in the Southeast Atlantic. But I will mention there is kind of something here. I mean, we do have some spin. We've got some tight isobars, a wave axis, we'll say, here over the Southeast Atlantic. At the same time, the European had a storm. So the only difference between the 2 models is one develops at the other one doesn't. But then we move this further ahead into time. And again, this is Halloween night, I should add. We get this into that first week in November, and look at what happens with that wave axis. You get some low pressure beginning to spin, and just like the GFS, both models have this big gyre or big area of thunderstorm activity that is kind of spinning here in that 7 to 10 day time frame. So to start the first couple of days of November. So again, they both agree on that. The only difference is the GFS spins up something more significant out of it, while the European kind of just keeps it this big general, again, spin and gyre in that region. And about 10 days from now, again, I wouldn't even really call this a tropical storm. Maybe you could call it a depression or something, and maybe even still an open wave. But it does have the general idea that conditions could become favorable enough for development. And it's not the only model showing that. The Canadian model, similar also here, we'll get this into the first couple of days of November. Just like the GFS, forms something here into the Southeast Atlantic out of this wave axis, has a tropical storm there, and then eventually getting this even further ahead into time, getting towards the end of the run, again, getting a full-blown tropical storm out of that one wave axis up near Bermuda, and then trying to spin up that area down in the Caribbean. So you're probably wondering, well, why is there so much confusion in the models? Why can they not make up their mind? Well, what's happening is we're getting a favorable MJO phase, and I'm not going to get into all the science behind what that means, but basically what that means in simplified terms is there is a favorable upper level pattern that is moving over this part of the world during this time frame for tropical development. We're getting divergence aloft, meaning convergence at the surface, or imagine, two arrows hitting each other. And what happens when things hit each other is they have to deflect, and they deflect upward, and that creates a rising motion in the atmosphere. That combined with these very warm sea surface temperatures, could lead to tropical development. Now, what the models are struggling with is what area over where this MJO phase is going to kind of take the benefit from that, or is going to really maximize it and try to form a storm. Again, the GFS has been very consistent over the past week plus now that'll be down here in the Caribbean, where we have very warm ocean temperatures, a lack of wind shear is what the GFS is forecasting. And then obviously you would get a storm out of that. Some of the other models, like this one, again, saying, well, maybe that happens a little bit more up here near Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and into the Bahamas. So again, it's a bit of a fight between the models, but what I'll say is most of them form at least something tropical-esque out of this favorable pattern, and I'll even show you the icon here just to end things out. And again, very similar to the other models, the first day of November, look at this spin up here into the Southwest Atlantic, and then another spin down here into the Caribbean. So you're going to keep hearing the GFS is on the island by itself, and I'm not disputing that, but what I will say is I think the other models are getting a little bit closer to the GFS, actually, as we continue to monitor this. So that's kind of the latest from the operational runs. We'll take a look at some ensembles, and if you know me, you know I love ensembles no matter what time of the year it is forecasting. And the GEFS continues to kind of latch onto this idea, and I will say have come into better agreement even on a formation location and track. A lot of them forming this well down into the south, west of the Caribbean, and then pulling it up north, generally towards Hispaniola or Jamaica, and then crossing the islands, getting towards the Bahamas, and then hooking it at some point towards the northwest here, generally probably towards the state of Florida. Now, the exact path it takes, obviously, they're all over the place, but there is this general curvature idea in the forecast, which would be relatively common, honestly, for this time of year. So, watching that's the GFS ensembles. The Euro ensembles, again, not a lot, but you get the resemblance between the two. Here's the GFS, here's the Euro. And I'll mention the European has even more ensembles in it, so this is probably, 10, maybe 20% of its ensemble members showing something form, so obviously not a high percentage. But you get the idea, something forms down here, pulls it up towards the islands generally, and then curves at some point towards the west-northwest. So, again, I'm not saying we're going to get a storm. I'm definitely not saying we're going to get a major hurricane by any means, but what I am saying is the GFS, I think, is onto something with some sort of tropical trouble forming down that way here. Towards the very last day or two of October, and then especially into that first week in November. I think we'll have some kind of last hurrah in the tropics before we can then finally, hopefully, I'm begging, switch our focus to the lower 48 and kind of these storm systems that are going to be crossing the country. All right, so that's the tropics. Let's talk about what's happening right now. And believe it or not, yes, that is rain that you're seeing on radar currently. Like I said, we had some pretty feisty storms yesterday, actually, kind of work on through portions of Kansas and Missouri. This is all thanks to kind of a front that is kind of working on through. And I'll say the front is a little bit stronger, I would say, with precipitation that it's outputting than maybe originally thought at one point. And sorry, my nose is itchy now, too. I don't know. I had a cough at the beginning, and now my nose is itchy. I don't know. Maybe I've got the plague or something. But I'm just kidding. Okay, back to the weather. We've got rain falling in this region as this front kind of swings on through. So a pretty soggy morning for a lot of folks here. And I'll even move this further ahead into the time now, through the Mississippi River Valley, up through kind of the St. Louis area, and then into the Ohio River Valley from Indianapolis, Columbus, back up through Detroit, and even up into Canada. A good amount of rain falling out of this. Now, the unfortunate thing is raining, as nice as this looks, this is going to weaken a bit as it kind of crosses the Appalachia chain. So don't expect, this much rain on radar when this kind of comes in for us folks along the I-95 corridor. But I do think some showers and some sprinkles will be possible. Not enough to save us from drought, not enough to save us from the fire conditions we've been seeing up into the Northeast, as indicated by these special weather statements in the beige. But it won't hurt, obviously. Definitely will not hurt. Other than that, I mean, really, folks, not anything happening across the country right now. So that's kind of the only storyline I would say, at least currently. Now, as we go into the long term, that's going to change a little bit. Let's talk about this current front that we're seeing. So this afternoon, we do have this big time upper level trough here. That is up into the Northeast. This is kind of where the cold air is. So this front is moving through. It's going to make things feel nicer. But the real core of the cold is not going to really move very far south until probably Sunday. And at that point, this will probably clip down into the Northeast, bringing some much cooler air. But other than that, folks, this is kind of a weaker cold front. So this isn't going to be one of those fall fronts that goes from 80 the day before to 40 the next day. But definitely will bring some relief for sure. And then after that point, we get into next week, and this is going to set the stage for that big pattern change that we've been talking about. And that's going to kind of be the next topic. But before we get there, let's time out the rest of this cold front for those of you that could see some rain out of it. So here we go. This is this afternoon, and you'll notice, even just compared to this morning right here to this afternoon, notice that this front is already weakening. We are still seeing this troughing. So again, the front kind of in this region. I'll go ahead and draw it. You like that really nice pink cold front. I don't know why I didn't use blue, but that's kind of where the front is going to be this afternoon. And obviously, again, pushing eastbound here towards the Appalachia chain. And with that, we will get some rainfall, I think, definitely this afternoon, especially up into the interior Northeast. Even with some afternoon heating, could see a flare-up of some showers through the Ohio River through Kentucky, Ohio up into West Virginia, and then into the Northeast. Unfortunately, though, just nothing heavy. These are going to be pretty light showers. I think if you're lucky, you'll pick up maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch in places. But other folks might not get any rain at all. And we get this into this evening. Again, you folks along the I-95 corridor, at this point, the front is already swinging through during the overnight. And the precipitation just is not a lot. I mean, we've got a couple sprinkles. And I'll tell you, if it doesn't rain from this, then you might not get any rain from or through the end of the month. And that would break some records in some cities. I know Philadelphia hasn't gotten an ounce of rain so far this month, and it could be the first month that doesn't rain at all in the month of Philadelphia. If we don't get any showers from this overnight tonight or into tomorrow afternoon, then yeah, that's probably going to be the case. Now, as this front moves eastbound, we are going to see a bit of a backdoor cold front out of it. So right here's the front overnight tonight into the early morning hours of tomorrow. This is kind of the location of the front. And what's going to happen is we're going to kind of get some cold air damming here. So this front's going to kind of sneak on down here into North Carolina and South Carolina. And that could be enough to spark a couple of showers here. Well, one through one through Tennessee rather, and into Arkansas Saturday morning. But then Saturday afternoon, just enough daytime heating and that cold advection southward. We've got a couple showers popping up across South Carolina here during the evening hours on Saturday. We'll see if this is enough. What I will say, generally, whenever it's been dry for this long, you need something a little bit more than this to kind of really initiate any sort of rainfall. I'm not saying it's not going to rain. I do think we'll get scattered showers through South Carolina and maybe even North Carolina for our Saturday afternoon. But is it enough to really add up? Probably not. I think at the most, a couple people, again, could pick up on 1/4 of an inch of rainfall. But overall speaking, still slim pickings here for our Saturday afternoon and evening as that rolls through. In fact, I will say any rain that falls might be so interesting. I might have to storm chase it just to say I saw rain. But yeah, that swings on through by overnight Saturday into Sunday. And I will say the models have been a little bit more uh, excited about the rainfall idea. We'll see. Maybe again, it is a little bit more like this, like the HERS shows, and we've got scattered rain all Saturday evening and afternoon and overnight into Sunday through South Carolina. I just wouldn't get so excited until we see it, kind of thing. Again, kind of, it's tough to break these droughts that we're in. So we might need a bigger storm system than this one, but again, doesn't hurt. Definitely would help to get any sort of rainfall. All right, what about the West Coast? Well, here we go out west, and I'm realizing this video is going way longer already than I thought it would, but next storm system for the west moves in overnight tonight into tomorrow. So today, pretty beautiful, but by tonight, again, rain moving through the Pacific Northwest. That continues into Saturday afternoon. These scattered showers continue to work on through, heavy at times, as again, a pretty potent storm kind of moves up into Canada, and we're on that moist advection side of the front here. Through the Pacific Northwest. So it's that time of the year where it's just kind of storm after storm up that way. You folks, I'm sure, are more than used to it if you're from that part of the country and have lived there for a while. All right, so what's on the horizon here? Well, again, this pattern flip is the big thing we're discussing. So let's get this into Monday afternoon. And at this point, here's what's left of our cold front in the Northeast. But I think from here on out, what's going to be the big theme is this big ridge that takes over across the east. This is really going to bump up temperatures, but at the same time, we've got a big trough out west that is kind of bringing down temperatures. And what's happening in between is we're getting this big time battleground zone, and that's why the jet stream goes a little bit haywire here starting as early as Tuesday afternoon. We've got very strong winds aloft, indicating to me that we have a sharp temperature gradient between the west and the east. And this could lead to some cyclogenesis, some storm formation, and potentially even some severe weather next week. And this is going to be a pattern that holds. You'll notice that kind of area stays there for a while, and it's trough after trough that kind of tries to run into this ridge. But overall speaking, through the next 10 days, folks, I mean, the pattern's not going to budge from that for a while. So we'll definitely need to watch it. And again, I think it could be a pretty good sign of things to come through the next 10 days or so. All right, so here we go into this weekend. Again, storminess up into the Pacific Northwest. Again, a couple of showers along this high pressure on the southern end as we get a little bit of this backdoor cold front and kind of some moist air interacting with that cold air. But overall, not a lot. Here we go, though, into early next week, and you'll notice this is what I'm talking about. Storm systems kind of forming here. This is Tuesday afternoon. Here's one. Here's another right behind it. Again, right along this very sharp temperature gradient in between the two. So it could be very cold in North Dakota next week and very warm in Missouri, kind of forecast with this setup. But you'll notice storm system forms. Another storm system forms by Wednesday. And then, that just becomes a theme. Another storm system after that by the weekend, just after Halloween. And you'll notice some of these do become quite potent. I mean, this one, for example, a little more than a week from right now, I mean, that's a pretty good storm system. That would bring some severe weather, plenty of rainfall, maybe even some snow on the north side. You see there breaking out across portions of Minnesota. The one even before that, this one here, this is next Tuesday and Wednesday. This could bring some pretty good mountain snow and some severe weather as well. So you get the idea. The theme here is next week, storm system after storm system crossing the middle of the country. And with that, we do introduce the chances for some severe weather. Our severe weather ingredients, you'll notice, really picking up here towards the middle of the week, starting really Tuesday, I would say, into Wednesday here. And then another flare up next weekend with that secondary storm system that could be pretty feisty as well. So need to watch for severe weather chances. Snowfall chances, I mean, it's going to snow a lot in the Rockies. Outside of there, I do think this northern tier of the country through northern Minnesota into the Dakotas, specifically the western Dakotas and into western Nebraska, we could see some snow outside of the Rockies for sure. But we're going to have to get a little bit closer before we can really discuss how much snow or if it snows at all into that region. But other than that, not seeing any big-time non-mountain snow events here to start the first couple of days of November. Rainfall-wise, this is now through Tuesday. So again, you'll notice a couple of showers popping up here across South Carolina, North Carolina, into the Ohio River Valley. But the real rain comes next week, and you'll notice that kind of really blows up through the middle of the country. And as we get 10 days out, this is really going to be nice to see. I mean, we've got places getting 3 to 5 inches of rain in that 5 to 10 day time frame. So that'll really help to kind of ease any drought concerns out that way. Unfortunately, Again, those of us in the east of the Appalachia chain, again, we're struggling here to get any kind of rainfall of significance throughout the next 10 days as that ridge really locks in and deflects any of these storm systems up into Canada rather than kind of crossing the country, which is what we would like to see for some more kind of rainy pattern, I guess, in the east. And with that ridge does unfortunately come the temperature problem that we're going to see. If you're a fan of fall, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It has been pretty mild. It's going to stay mild. Now we'll have cold shots again this weekend as those fronts pass, but after that next week, it looks to warm up pretty big time again to end out October and to start the first couple of days of November here. So again, very warm east of the Rockies, especially east of the Mississippi, and very kind of moist here in the middle part of the country, again, with those storm systems crossing. But like I said, if you're in along or east of the Appalachia chain, folks, I mean, we're still struggling to get any kind of rain here in the 6 to 10 day time frame. Florida, again, maybe some tropical activity in that area could bring some rain to you. But really all the rain looks to get stuck out into the plains through even up into the Midwest. But yeah, that's kind of the forecast, folks. Luckily, I was able to get through that. Only kind of coughed at the beginning there, so maybe I magically fixed whatever problem I had. I don't know. Who knows? Either way, though, y'all have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Enjoy it. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.